So it's going to be more like taking an Uber than it is going to be like flying a plane. And that is the beauty of it. And you're going to be able to land in all these places where a regular plane would not be able to take you. And a helicopter wouldn't be able to land there because people don't like the noise, and many people do not like flying helicopters anyhow. Yeah, the ease of transition, like that is the best part. It's like I lived in Europe for a while, and taking a train used to be just fantastic because you just walked in, got into, you knew exactly where your seat was, sat in, and then you were gone. And there's some security, but I think that we're going to have that in the air soon.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Mr. Deed podcast show. Today we have Lisa Wright. She's actually the founder of Landings, a company building a nationwide network of Vertiports. Now, landing is so you're probably thinking, what the hell are Vertiports? Landing and charging stations for electrical aircraft, and it's actually across rural North America. So Lisa has a background in architecture and energy management. She focuses on positioning infrastructure in agricultural, medical, and logistics hubs where use cases drive demand, landing and securing 2,000 plus strategic sites, advancing what she calls rural air mobility. Love that. So, do you think we'll have electric cars soon, like flying electric cars?
I don't just think we're going to have them. We have them, just not in North America yet. So
Hmm.
in Asia, there are 120 vertiports already flying autonomous aircraft that carry people.
Autonomous.
Exactly, the pilot, not autonomous, they're remotely piloted. So there's
Okay.
two passengers, no pilot carrying people. So they have them in China. In the Middle East, the American manufacturers will be flying this year. In the US, the FAA is going through the approvals for the aircraft, but we will have flying cars in the next 18 months in the US.
Just what happens when there's an accident in a flying car?
Yeah,
I'm sitting there thinking because I'm in Florida, so I'm imagine I-4 is already horrible. I'm from Miami. Miami traffic is already horrible. I'm like, how will the flight pattern be and the traffic be in the air with these flying cars?
Miami is a big use case. There's a big push. Embraer Air has a vertiport, or pardon me, an eVTOL, which is the electric vehicle vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So the
Mhm.
ones that carry passengers. There's a company out of Brazil that is looking to launch their flights in South Florida. The Florida DOT just released, I believe it was in December, their advanced air mobility strategy, meaning they're looking at
Hmm.
this. A lot of the conversation, because of Miami and around Miami and the horrific traffic, is about urban flights, point to point. Stephen Ross from Related has talked about putting vertiports on top of his residential towers so that residents will have access to this other mode of transportation as well. I personally don't see the aircraft as removing a lot of congestion on the road. For the people who will fly them in Miami, it will be an amazing experience. Right now, they carry between 4 and 6 passengers, and the number of routes isn't going to be enough. I don't think you have to be concerned about congestion in the highway, in the skyway just yet.
That and what would the cost for that, something like that be? At least six figures, I'm assuming.
You mean for the aircraft or for the flight?
Yeah, for the aircraft itself. But
Yeah.
let's say if I wanted to buy one, not only the cost, but then the upkeep.
Yeah, so the cost of the aircraft right now, the promised costs were supposed to be substantially lower than, and when they're in mass production, they will be, than other
Mhm.
sorts of aircraft. They're also going to be produced in mass volume, much more like an EV car than like an airplane. Boeing built 350 airplanes last year. That's nothing. Tesla built 500,000 or something, maybe even more. I should know that number. But at any rate, the price for them right now, because they're brand new, is running around $5 million, which is a lot, but the cost to maintain them is much lower than traditional aircraft because they're electric. And so the
Mhm.
electrification of the aircraft means that the maintenance and repair is 1/10 of what it is to maintain other aircraft.
Interesting. How do you move from architecture and energy management into building a national Vetaport network?
Yeah.
What happened there?
So, yes, many years as an architect. First license was in Florida, second license was in New York, and built many retail locations, so all commercial architecture, no residential. What I really realized I excelled at was scaling architecture. So we would design a flagship store, say on Fifth Avenue or somewhere lovely, and then we'd build 500 of them, throughout the world, or 5,000 throughout the globe. I was really good at scaling things. That got transferred into a couple of years ago, working with a prop tech startup that was doing energy management for buildings via digital twins. So essentially, architecture for energy management. How those come together was, while I was a partner at my firm, we were doing a private jet company. We were building their terminals for them. And so these are not many people. I have only been on a private jet once in my life, but it's an experience. The FBO is the fixed based operations, is the part of the airport you go to for your private jet. And so we were working on those. And that kind of gave me an inside view of how it is to fly private, but also how rare it is to fly private. And when I heard about these aircraft that are electric and that eventually the price is going to be the same price as an Uber to take, this is the promise we have right now. I thought I'd rather have that version of private flight. So I'd had this FBO background, and then the energy management, which was, an outcast in a way, or a residual of dealing with buildings. It turns out finding land for these vertiports, especially where I'm looking, we've done almost 2,000 feasibility studies on properties in mostly the Northeast right now. Land is not the problem. Energy is the problem, because we have to provide an EV network for all of these aircraft. And so we could get them a location tomorrow. And because vertiports fall within the same regulations as a helipad, if we could put a helipad there, we could put a vertiport there, more or less. The real problem is that we need to be able to charge these aircraft. So that is where the energy management comes in very handy, because we're essentially building a nationwide EV network for heavy drones and eVTOLs.
So when it comes to, so you're saying that's what you're doing then to maybe solve the energy problem?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's two parts to the vertiport. One is obviously the land and making sure it's zoned properly. We've got permission to build there. The FAA, most of my locations, because I'm looking in suburban and rural locations, they're commercial, but they're pretty open airspace above them. So those aren't really the problems. And then on top of it, the grids are really weak out there. So we're actually adding either solar, because we have enough land for it, solar and battery systems, or a battery system on top of a weak grid connection.
Okay, that's awesome. That's all. Yeah, because I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about how energy right now is really the issue. So it's funny that it looks like obviously that's a big talking point right now, especially when it comes to something like that you're creating yourself. So great to hear. So I actually had the experience of flying private about a month ago, and I tell you what, holy hell, that was awesome. Because you don't
Yeah.
have to go through all this stuff through the airport. It was so easy. And I'm like, this is nice. Mind you, it was a little plane and it scared the shit out of me when it was going through the clouds because it was shaking like hell. But I'm like, all right, this is pretty cool. And I think the biggest thing, the convenience of not going through all these security checkpoints.
Yeah.
That was the biggest convenience that
Yeah.
I loved.
Yeah, you've just hit on exactly what my dream here is, right? So once these aircraft can take off and land vertically, we have helicopters, but helicopters don't have a great safety profile. They're loud. People don't like them. The electric aircraft are much quieter. They're 1,000 times quieter. They have a lot of backup safety issues. So they're a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that is superior to put in small locations now. And once you remove the need for an airport, right? You do not need huge parking lots and lots of check-ins and security. And all of these aircraft that we're talking about are either carrying freight, logistics, there's emergency services, there's a lot of services on these aircraft. But even the passenger aircraft, they're below 9 passengers, which changes the requirements for the security check-ins. So it's going to be more like taking an Uber than it is going to be like flying a plane. And that is the beauty of it. And you're going to be able to land in all these places where a regular plane would not be able to take you. And a helicopter wouldn't be able to land there because people don't like the noise. And many people do not like flying helicopters anyhow. Yeah, the ease of transition, like that is That is the best part. It's like I lived in Europe for a while, and taking a train used to be just fantastic because you just walked in, got into, you knew exactly where your seat was, sat in, and then you were gone. And there's some security, but I think that we're going to have that in the air soon.
So, in your opinion, how can Veriports now become a revenue generating addition to, let's say, commercial real estate portfolios, etc.?
Yeah, it depends on which type of property you're talking about. However, there's a good use case for it being an amenity to
Hmm.
certain types of commercial properties, whether that those are office parks or industrial parks. We like to talk to logistics companies because it's also a lot of the logistics companies are starting to build the charging for their semi trucks, for electric trucks. We can piggyback on that and essentially be a multimodal method of transportation. So we can it's in addition to them. Obviously, medical is any medical property. Many of them already have a helipad. Some of them don't. For the smaller and heavy drones, a small vertiport would be great for transportation of blood, organs, all kinds of medications. There's all sorts of use cases. So those are like three of the major commercial types of properties that we look at, but it's almost limitless in my mind. Everybody, U-Haul needs them. Tractor Supply could have them. Walmart has drone service already. They could use larger drone service. They have a flat surface outside. They have charging capabilities. It becomes an additional, for many, especially like retail, it's an amenity and an extra service. And for other properties, it's a way to get more tenants and offer their tenants some improved service as well.
That's really cool. I'm just thinking, man, because so I remember when all this drone stuff started, I was visiting some family in the Carolinas, and I'm sitting there talking to my uncle. I'm like, what in the hell is going on in the skies? And I think that was Amazon testing drone deliveries.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so cool. So
Yeah.
let's say someone like myself has some land. Okay. What makes a property Veriport ready, and how can owners evaluate their land to see, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to pick up the phone and call Lisa to see
That's
if
great.
we could do a deal.
Yeah, it's a question I get very often. It's a question I get so often that my team has built essentially a feasibility app online. It's app.landings.co, and you can put in your address. And if we've already got your county, we're doing it county by county. If your county is already in our database, it will do the analysis for you. If your county is not, it will still do the analysis, but say, let us get back to you once we add your county. What we look for is enough land. So we
Mhm.
say a minimum of 1.5 acres of free space. So meaning there's not a building on it, but our app will tell us if there's a building on it as well when we run the analysis. It has to be fairly level because we're building these on the ground. We're building 2000. We don't want to build churches of flight. We want to
Mhm.
build really practical, useful buildings, but we're not landing on top of buildings or anything at this moment. So the land has to be relatively flat. We do look to see if there's a grid connection. It is almost every property at this moment fails our whole feasibility because the grid connection is not strong enough. That doesn't matter because, like I said, we're at that. That's the whole reason we're building battery backup and solar systems co-location. We also look at, is it in a flood zone? Are there any obstacles, which is an FAA issue, right? Are there any obstacles within a 4,000-foot radius within our flight plane? And then we look at, are there any elements about the land nearby is there like in Florida, you might not have it. In New York, we do. Is there a cliff? Is there just some strange thing just outside of view of your lot that we need to see that might restrict it? So if we're restricted on two sides, either by obstacles or by land, some issue, we can still build a vertiport. We just have to be sure that the routes would come in from the two other points. If we've got three sides blocked, most of the time we'll say that we could probably find a better location. But like I said, go to app.landings.co and you can run your property there.
That's really cool. So, how does that revenue sharing structure work then? Let's say my land works for you guys. How does that revenue structure work for the landowners and the investors?
Yeah, so we're building our business model on the, say, American Tower model, or back in the day, oil and gas, in which we're getting options on the land. So we're not leasing the land and we're not purchasing the land, at least not for the first, I'm going to say 400 in the network. After that point, we might decide like somewhere would be better to purchase or in the future to be purchased. So we're getting options on the land. Right now we have a 2-year option. And the option is essentially let us run feasibility, see if we can get zoning, permitting, designs onto this property. And we're the only ones who are allowed to build a vertiport here. And we want to stake our claim, say this is where the vertiport's going to go. And if we don't build it in 2 years, you're released. If we start working on it and we build a vertiport, we pay for the construction. We get the financing for the equipment, for the energy equipment. And then when we're up and running, it's a revenue share essentially with the landlord, the owner.
That's pretty cool. All right, so guys, you hear that? You at least need 2 years before you start seeing any income. But
That's
hey,
correct.
but then,
I mean, I
but
say that's correct, although, so we have multiple revenue streams, right? So
hmm,
charging is one revenue stream. And that if we have a charger on a site and not aircraft coming yet, that's why we're looking at these chargers that work with semi trucks and municipal fleet vehicles. So there's some charging, which is not a lot of income there. On the other hand, we're talking to the service providers who will fly on our network saying, great, we've got this location and we're building. So our first network right now is 12 locations in upstate New York. And we're saying, look, we've got this network. We're not building one vertiport at a time. We're going to build a network. And if you have, for example, Amazon has rural deliveries, last mile issues, getting to those locations, we'll sell you the first morning slot. You
hmm,
can get deliveries into this slot in the morning. You can have the 9 a.m. or the 7 a.m., whatever you want. So we can also add, there's revenue for certain. Not every location will get that same level of revenue, but some of the more desirable flagship locations will definitely be selling slots as well. And that can start sooner. If it's heavy drone and logistics or emergency services, those aircraft are already in the air. Firefighting, those aircraft are already in the air.
have you been in one of these aircrafts yet?
I have sat in 2 of them. I have not flown in either. I'm hoping to do so very soon within the next year. But yeah, I have not flown in one. I've flown the flight simulators for both of them as well, which is
Okay,
fun.
I can
Actually,
imagine
I've sat in
that.
3 now that I say that. I've sat in 3.
So what happened? It wasn't ready to fly yet, or they're like, no, too much
No,
risk.
it was a road show. Yeah, like
Gotcha. Okay.
they're definitely not taking, but it is interesting right now. And the FAA's got a pilot program that they're going to announce this month for pilot training for the aircraft. So there's a lot of support from this administration, especially for these aircraft and for this industry, this burgeoning industry. They're going to have pilots. However, as I mentioned, in China, they're being remotely piloted. All of the aircraft that are going through their certification right now, many of their certification hours have been flown remotely, meaning
Hmm.
there's been no pilot because that's how you do the beginning of certification, and they can be flown remotely. So I think that 5 years after this business gets big, we'll see the pilots start disappearing from the craft. But I think it'll take us a while to get used to
Yeah, no, I bet.
that.
Yeah, it's like who the hell's flying this thing?
That's right.
Nobody. So some kid right there in the living room just flying you around. Yeah, yeah, that's
He won't
basic.
be in the living room.
No.
He won't be at a Game Boy or anything, but one of the groups we work with is a flight school, and they're currently doing a lot of the pilot training for commercial pilots as well as drones. And we've spoken to them about having remote pilot stations and training at some of our larger locations.
That's pretty cool. All right, 2 more questions. So, why do you think now is by far the strategic moment to secure sites before advanced air mobility has critical mass?
Yeah, multiple reasons, but the main one is these aircraft are going to land. They're going to fly to where they can land. This is a given. Right now, there are only maybe 24 locations highlighted in the US as potential landing locations. I find that extremely limiting. They're almost all in cities, but I'm in communications with all of the manufacturers, and they will land in any place that there's demand for them to land in and that there's a location. So if you want to build a vertiport 2 years from now when they're already in the air, there's probably already going to be a vertiport near you. And it's going to be too late. Everybody needs a vertiport. Every town needs a vertiport, and nobody needs two. So it's really important to be ahead of it. Also, for the energy infrastructure, these things take time. We've been working on this for 18 months, and I highly suspect we will have our first energy system set up around the same time that the first flights are going in the US. And we've started that would put us 2.5, 3 years early. So it just takes that amount of time.
It's really cool. Really cool. Can imagine. Yeah. I was like, maybe I want to buy one of those. But anyways, all right, I digress.
There are a lot of light sport craft, which are 1 or 2 person vehicles that you can purchase now. There's a waiting list for them. Pivotal's a big one. It's gotten a lot of press because they have a very unique aircraft. Drone's another one. So you as an individual can also purchase one of these.
Take some notes here on that one. Drone. Okay. All right, last question. If you could leave just one deed behind, one action, mindset, or even a lesson for anybody listening today, professional entrepreneur listening today, what would that be?
If I could leave one mindset, I would say associate yourself with the right people because they'll come back and be good for you in the future.
That's a good one. That's a good one. My parents always told me that.
I'm living that now. So that's
Are
why I
you?
say it. Yeah,
Okay.
no, like my advisors and everybody working with me, we're a startup. It's a new industry. Like you said, started by saying how you're an architect, how do you get into this? And I've my engineer, my architect, my marketing people, everybody who's working with me is buying my dream, which is amazing. Buying
That's
into my
awesome.
dream. And that's because I've known them for years and they're good people and it's a good place to be.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show today. Definitely enjoyed this one because didn't think we'll be talking about flying cars anytime soon. But yeah, you've seen them so many times on Back to the Future and all these other movies back in the 80s and 90s. I'm like, but now look, it's actually because I'm always like, when is it not going to happen?
It's
It's
actually going to
happening.
happen.
It's
That's
going to
right.
happen.
It's going
So
to
I'm
happen.
excited and scared at the same time.
Yeah.
So let's see how that goes.
Great.
But thank you again for being on the show. Guys, thank you so much for listening to our amazing episode today with Lisa. And make sure if you have any questions whatsoever, we're going to have all of Lisa's contact details below. Maybe you have that land that they will require. So please make sure you like, subscribe, and make sure you pay attention to we come out every Friday with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Mr. D Podcast Show. Take care. If this episode helped you understand real estate better, the next one takes it even further, covering everything from investing strategies to honest agent insights. Learn how to make smarter real estate decisions, whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out. Click the video on screen to keep watching.